She did it with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You're too bitter to be around the baby," my daughter said, and for a breathless second I thought she was joking, but then she slid the stroller back from my doorway like I was a contagion. The cruelty was simple, precise, practiced, like she had rehearsed it on the drive over, because when I moved to touch the baby's hands, she turned the stroller just enough that I saw my own face reflected in the little plastic window of the rain cover, a woman I barely recognized, jaw clenched, hope collapsing. I had been marinating apples for a pie, bought with the last of my grocery cash because I knew the smell would drift through the hallway and bring the baby's attention toward me, because I knew that babies remember scents even when they forget faces. I had timed the oven so it would sing as they arrived, so I could say, "Stay, eat, rest," and be once again the kind of mother who fed everyone before feeding herself. I had imagined my daughter would roll her eyes and step inside anyway, that she would pretend exasperation even as she cut a warm slice for herself. I had pictured the baby reaching out a hand to grab at my apron strings, at the rosary hanging from the peg by the door, at the life of a home that had kept us safe for 32 winters. I had made room. I always made room. Only this time, my daughter had come to take something away. "What did I say to make you think that?" I asked, and there it was, the pleading in my voice I swore I would never let her hear again. The weakness she despised because it reminded her she could hurt me. "You said a lot," she replied, examining her nails like they were the most complicated part of the morning. "About my choices. About Mark. About what I should do with the house. It's negative, Mom. Toxic. You make everything feel tight. The house." I felt the word tighten around my ribs like binding. 2 weeks ago, she brought paperwork, casual as if we were swapping recipes. "It's just to simplify things," she had said, dropping the folder on my kitchen table where the light always made everything look honest. A quick signature so she and Mark could help with the tax burden, the maintenance, the someday when you're not up for details. I had read the first page and felt a cold draft from a door no one had opened. It was a transfer, a quitclaim, a surrender pressed between the lines. I told her I needed time. She told me time was money. Now here she was, the baby in a stroller like a shield, talking about my bitterness while her gaze slid past my shoulder toward the living room where the framed black and white family photos hung. My mother in her wedding dress, me at 19 on the stoop holding a paper sack of groceries we could barely afford, my girl at 3 with a ribbon too tight in her hair, crying because it hurt, because beauty had already been taught to cost. "You're not here to see me," I said. "You're here to punish me. Don't make it drama." She laughed a breath that wasn't a laugh. "I'm just setting boundaries. We're all about healthy boundaries now." Healthy. The word in her mouth meant whatever made her life smoother. The last time she'd said it was when she took my mother's wedding set to clean, before selling it to pay off a credit card. Healthy, she'd said as if the debt had been a tumor we were removing together. Healthy, no more clutter. She'd called my grief clutter and then hugged me quickly, 2 taps on the back like I was a colleague, not someone whose hands had bled to keep her clothed. "Let me see him," I said softly, "because pride is expensive, and I have paid enough." She lifted the edge of the rain cover like she was being generous. He blinked, my grandson, a constellation of my husband's brow and my own stubborn chin. The baby's hand, small as a prayer, opened toward mine. I could feel the ghost of his skin on my fingertips, the warmth where future lives. Then she dropped the cover again. "We're going," she said. "I just came to say it. If you want to be in our lives, sign the papers. It'll make everything easier. Otherwise, boundaries." There it was. The motive behind her polished cruelty, shining like a coin at the bottom of a fountain that had been emptied overnight, the house. Our house. My husband rebuilt the stairs with his own hands, sanding each tread until the wood showed a pale, raw throat. He died with sawdust under his nails because he could never stop making things safer for us. When he fell on the ice that winter and the fracture spread through him like a silent crack in a glass, we sold the truck to pay the hospital bill and he said, "At least the house is ours, Mara. At least we'll always have this." I painted rooms at midnight with the windows open, wrote checks with coins taped to them, took a second shift at the bakery until my hips ached. Every sacrifice had been measured against the stability of these walls. Not for me, I told myself, for her. For our daughter, whose shoes were always the right size even when my soles split and flapped like tongues. "I won't sign," I said now. "Not like this. Not because you were cruel enough to bar me from my grandson. That's not a boundary, that's blackmail." Her jaw tensed. She hated when I used the right words. You're bitter, she repeated, lower. You're bitter about Dad, about life, about me. And I won't have that around my son. Mark agrees. His therapist says. I don't care what his therapist says. My voice surprised me, level clear, the old mezzo I had forgotten I owned. Tell me the truth, Lila. Is this about helping me or about the listing you and Mark already drafted? The one with the photographs of the living room that somehow never shows the crucifix. Her eyes flickered, as quick as moth wings near a candle. I knew then I had cut close to the wire. I had once known every tell of hers, the pinch she gave a straw wrapper when about to lie, the way she tilted her head like a bird listening for worms when she smelled money, the way she used words like we when what she meant was I. The neighborhood's changing, she said briskly. You're alone here. It's unsafe. Remember the break-in across the street? I remembered. I also remembered that she had been the one to send me the link to a real estate video tour of a cozy rehab-ready property in a vibrant transitional area, which was code for by the bones of someone's life and strip it for resale. Take care, Mom, she added, pressing the stroller handle. Think about the baby. As if I had thought about anything else since the day she was born and made me swear I would never leave her, even when she pushed. She started down the steps, and I stood in the doorway holding a dish towel that smelled like cinnamon. I thought of everything this house had held, my husband singing off-key while installing shelves, the laughter the night the roof leaked and we put out every pot like a metallic choir, the fights that burned fast and guttered, the apologies that took time, the thousands of nights I dampened a washcloth and pressed it to my daughter's feverish forehead, whispering bargains to a God I could not see. I thought of the baby's soft eyelashes and how, if I were the kind of woman who gave up, I would sign and smile and say, "You're right, boundaries," and then be allowed to pat his hair once a week under supervision in a new living room with cream furniture where my presence would be a scheduled event. The thought made my teeth ache. Lila, I called, stepping out so the cold wrapped around my neck like a reprimand. She stopped one step down, unwilling to turn fully. I changed your diapers, I said quietly. I learned to cut my own hair so you'd have the money for dance class. Your father and I took turns napping in the hallway when you were sick so you could see us the moment you opened your eyes. If there is bitterness in me, it is the place where sweetness was scraped away. Don't ask me to pretend it didn't happen. The wind shivered the dead leaves in the maple we never could afford to have trimmed. The baby fussed, a tiny sound like the first squeak of a hinge about to give. Goodbye, Mom, she said, and the words were steel. She pushed the stroller down the path without looking back, and I watched the distance widen like a wound. Inside, the oven timer went off, loopy and cheerful, a sound you might choose when you believe good things are always arriving on time. I pulled the pie and set it on the cooling rack, and the smell filled the kitchen, brown sugar heat, the caramel note that makes even strangers drop into chairs. I should have eaten a slice right then, to absorb some comfort, but I couldn't swallow. Instead, I did what I always do when the world goes against the grain. I cleaned. I wiped the counter that was already clean, I folded the towel into a precise square. I returned the folder of papers she had left weeks ago to the table and aligned its edges with the wood grain. That was when I noticed a detail I hadn't let myself see before, because the seeing would require admitting something monstrous. My name, signed on a document inside the first page, not in my hand, but so close that someone not looking for the truth would miss it. The M slightly too curved. The R without the sharp cross-stitch I'd made mine since 7th grade. The A that didn't slam down with the final certainty of a woman who has kept this family upright through storms. A careful imitation of my life, like a daughter dressing in her mother's coat and walking different streets. A cold calm arrived. It didn't feel like panic, it felt like a new law had been passed inside my chest. I opened the rest of the folder. A letter from a lender with polite enthusiasm about the pending transaction. A printout of an email chain where my daughter's husband, with his $1,000 shoes and a smile like a white fence around a rotting lot, talked about liquidity calculus and taking advantage of the current window. A draft listing for our address with photographs taken in sly moments when I wasn't in the room, the mantle cleared of my candle and the baby's first knitted booties, the bookshelf rearranged to look minimalist, the light changed to make everything seem a little less like us. I heard my husband's voice the way you do when you're about to forget something important. Hold steady, he would say when a board wanted to warp. Clamp and hold. Wood remembers what pressure taught it. He always believed a thing could be returned to its shape if you knew how to press. I pressed my lips together until they thinned. Money. Inheritance. Manipulation. The trinity of modern mercy. I took off my apron and smoothed it on the chair. My hands were steady. I thought of the backstory I could give a stranger to make them understand. The nights sewing additional elastic into shoes to make them last until the winter coat went on sale. The mornings behind the bakery counter when the auditors came and I smiled while calculating in my head which flour sacks we could push to next week. The way I hid our silver dollars in a jar of rice because coins can be food when you're foolish enough to eat them. I thought of the promises, hers to me when she was 14 and furious and said she'd never leave me, mine to her when she was 8 and stood crying by the school fence because other girls laughed at her thrift store sweaters, and I told her I would always find a way. I put all of it on an invisible scale and saw my daughter's words on the other side, "You're too bitter to be around the baby." I saw their true weight, not a diagnosis, a disqualification. A strategy. How easily I had accepted insults when they came wrapped in slogans about healing. I picked up the phone and called the one person I knew who would answer even if I hadn't spoken to her in years, my sister-in-law, Angela. She had eyes like a hawk that had given up pretending to be a pigeon. We weren't close because when my husband died a fine invisible crack formed between us, too delicate to name and too dangerous to ignore. But Angela had been at the table when my husband and I rewrote our wills the winter after he got sick. She had watched us initial and sign and notarize and tuck away and then, later that night, watched me cry over the sink because you never sign your name so many times in one day unless someone is dying. She would remember. "Angela," I said when she picked up, her voice wary like she'd been expecting a debt collector and instead found an old hymn. "I need your help." "So it's time," she replied, not asking for what. That's the quiet covenant of women who survived the same man and loved him and wanted to forgive him for leaving them first. "Come over." "I can't," I said, glancing at the folder that felt like it contained a live wire. "I need to know where we kept the originals. The wills. The deed. All of it." "Safe deposit box at Marshall Street Credit," she answered without hesitation. "Under both your names." "You haven't checked it since," she trailed off, and I could see, like a film projected on the wall of my kitchen, the day after the funeral when I simply couldn't stand beneath fluorescent lights while a polite clerk told me which signatures meant what about a life that had ended. "Thank you," I said, and my throat closed around the words because gratitude can be a harder thing than grief when it's been a while. "And Angela? If Lila calls you, don't tell her you heard from me." There was a pause, then a dry little laugh that had once driven my husband mad because he said it sounded like the beginning of trouble. "She already did," Angela said. "She asked about streamlining." I told her she was too young to use words like that. "Did she mention a signature?" "Oh, Mara," Angela said. "She's her father's daughter when it comes to getting what she wants, but he never would have taken the roof from over a baby. You know that, don't you? You know he'd haunt us before he let it happen." "I know," I said, and the knowledge was a solid thing I could set my coffee mug upon in a windstorm. After we hung up, I put the folder in my tote bag under a sweater, under the apple pie wrapped in foil because I had a superstition about leaving food on kitchen counters when there was trouble in the family. The sweetness evaporates, my mother used to say, like sugar left open on a humid night. I changed my shoes. I pulled my hair back. I tucked my rosary into my pocket because some habits are more than habit, they're architecture. I took the framed photograph of my husband from the mantel and slipped it into the tote, face toward my body so he would be my witness even if no one else believed me. On the way out, I paused by the mirror and studied the woman in it. Did my daughter see bitterness, or did she see a boundary of my own finally fossilizing into something she could not bend? The lines around my mouth had been carved by years of holding words between my teeth until they dissolved safely. I touched my cheek and thought, let me be as hard as necessary and as soft as true. I stepped outside. The sky had a murlied look, white and gray swirled together like batter before the flower disappears. A neighbor waved and I waved back because that is another architecture, the scaffolding of ordinary kindness that keeps a street upright when families are falling down inside their houses. I turned left toward Marshall Street and felt the folder heavy against my hip. I was halfway down the block when a car eased to the curb beside me, slow, patient, like a thing that had been waiting just out of sight for me to step into the open. The passenger window lowered. Mark leaned across the seat, the smile already arranged, his tie knotted with that particular geometric perfection that always made me think of hands tightening. "Heading somewhere, Mara?" he asked as if he were asking what pies were on special at the bakery. "Need a ride? We're family." He rested his forearms on the steering wheel, and the glint of a lawyer's card holder on the dash caught the weak sun. "Oh, and before I forget," he added lightly, "there are some updates on the paperwork you'll want to see." Just small things. Streamlining. Why don't we go over them together? I didn't get into the car. I stood on the curb with my tote against my hip and the cold working its careful fingers under my coat, and I watched Mark's smile hover like a salesman's drone, the kind that hums and never lands unless you sign. He tapped 2 fingers on the steering wheel as though we were keeping time together. The baby stroller was gone with Lila. I pictured them 2 blocks ahead, the rain cover blistering with the wind, my grandson's breath fogging a little oval I wasn't allowed to kiss. I'll walk, I said. Come on, Mara, he coaxed. Let me be useful for once. You're always insisting on doing things the hard way. I can drop you wherever. Marshall Street credit, I said, because I wanted to see what happened to his face. The flinch was quick, like a trick candle snuffed and suddenly burning again. Perfect, he said. I need to stop by my office, just next door. We can both be efficient. Streamlined. He loved that word, rolled it like a mint on his tongue. I'll walk, I repeated, and the drone of his smile died. He laughed then, low and companionable, a sound designed to make anyone listening assume I was being difficult and he was being patient. Suit yourself. Weather's changing. Roads get slick. He put the car in drive, the window began to roll up, then paused. Oh, and do bring that folder. You know, the one I saw on your table the other day? It's just that there are a few rounding errors. You wouldn't want the county to think you're avoiding obligations. Paperwork is so fussy. The window clicked shut. He rolled forward, slow as a threat learning to speak. I watched his taillights blink a polite red and then vanish at the corner. I walked. With every step the tote thumped my hip and with every thump I counted something I had paid. The overtime shift when my husband was sick and I fell asleep in the stockroom and woke with the imprint of cardboard across my face like a map. The month I ate toast and tea and told my daughter we were trying a cleanse because her friends' mothers were always cleansing something. The day we sold the truck and my husband said, "At least the house is ours." And I pretended not to see his eyes get wet. By the time I pushed open the glass door at Marshall Street Credit, the counting had become a rhythm as steady as my heartbeat. The lobby smelled like lemon and the polite poverty of small banks. The young teller with neat bangs glanced up and smiled with the practiced warmth of someone taught the difference between customer and client. How can I help you? Safe deposit box, I said. Under Mara and Angelo Vass. She typed and frowned as though the screen had whispered gossip. One moment. She picked up a phone and murmured into it, then smiled at me again. Mrs. Vass, the manager will help you personally. The manager appeared like a good coat pulled out for a storm, middle-aged, careful, a tie that had seen weddings and foreclosures. Mrs. Vass, he said, extending a hand. I'm Robert. Would you come with me? We walked down a hallway where the fluorescent lights hummed like nervous bees. He used a card to open a door, then led me into the vault room with its safety deposit grid of little doors, all the same size until you remember the weight behind them. He indicated the signature book. If you'll sign here. I took the pen. My name slid out of me the way a practiced prayer does. R for resolve, crack sharp and familiar. A with the final downstroke that always felt like setting a pot squarely on a stove. He compared it to the exemplar on the card, his finger following the line the way you trace a scar. I watched his eyes. I wanted to see the moment he recognized the imposter. He hesitated. Have you been in recently? He asked, too casually. No, I put the pen down and looked at him the way I used to look at my daughter when she was 13 and coming home with mascara she called, just a little smudge. There was an attempt, he said carefully. Last week. We declined access. The gentleman had paperwork, photocopies, I'm afraid, but he didn't have a key. He said he'd misplaced it. We don't open boxes without a warrant or both keys. He cleared his throat. He mentioned being family. Did he look like he could say the word streamlined without choking on it? I asked. A corner of the manager's mouth twitched. Policy, he said. Thank you, I said, and meant it. I have my key. My hands didn't shake as I opened the little velvet pouch I kept in my change purse. The key was heavier than I remembered, the way some truths get heavier when you have to use them. He turned his manager's key and I turned mine. The little door opened with the sound of a zipper. He pulled the metal box out and set it on the table in the little privacy booth. Take your time, he said, and closed the door behind him. Inside, the papers were where we had left them, manila envelopes, battered and stubborn. I slid out the originals, deed, will, the amendment in my husband's thin, exact handwriting when we added Angela as an emergency contact after he got sick. The signatures were ours. The notary seal was the woman with the cigarette laugh who cried at my husband's funeral and gave me a Tupperware of lasagna that tasted like someone loved me. I held the documents like babies. You don't grip a baby, you cup. I heard the vault door open, the air changed. The manager's voice preceded the shape of a man. "I'm sorry, sir, but you'll have to wait in the lobby." "No problem, Robert," came the easy, affable reply. "Just checking if Maura needed a ride home. We're all family here." He leaned in the doorway of the privacy booth like a poster for a company that wants you to think it's human. I placed my hand flat on the papers. He saw the gesture and smiled because he had noted, in his mental ledger, that I had something to protect. "Nice to see you, Maura," he said. "You know, I was just about to call. We realized one of the forms in the package you looked at had outdated language. The power of attorney bit is a mess. Our lawyer hates mess. We've got a new version that simplifies." "My husband and I never gave you power of attorney," I said. He lifted a palm. "Poor word choice. Not power of attorney, authorization. Just so I can help liaise with inspectors and title. You know, take the burden off. Lila's postpartum. We're trying to keep her stress-free." There it was again, his habit of taking moral words and stretching them like plastic over something that smelled of rot. Authorization. Liaise. Stress-free. All synonyms for "I will sign where you refuse to." "I'll be taking these," I said, sliding the envelope toward my tote. "Be careful," he said lightly. "Those are the only originals. You don't want anything to happen. God forbid a leak, for instance." He glanced at the ceiling. We both knew this room wasn't where pipes burst. The manager reappeared at his shoulder, his politeness less shiny now. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to step out." "No worries," Mark said, easing back. "We're all on the same team." When he had gone, the manager closed the door again and lowered his voice. "Do you want us to put a note on the account? To call you if anyone attempts to access?" "Yes," I said. "And I'd like a letter from you stating that a person attempted last week without proper authorization. Name him if you can." He pursed his lips. "We can note the attempt and that access was denied. We cannot identify a non-customer by name without a subpoena." "Then write what you can, sign it, and stamp it," I said. The old steel in me had woken. "Please." He nodded and went to draft it. I put the papers back in the box and then back into my tote. Before I closed the box, I hesitated and slipped in the photograph I had taken from the mantel that morning. My husband's face turned just enough toward the light to show the dimple he claimed made him too pretty for hard labor. It felt right that he should watch over the box, like a sentry who understood locks. When I came back into the lobby, the young teller kept her eyes on her screen as if looking directly at anyone would be a partisan act. Mark was at the counter pretending to fill out a form while casually blocking the exit. Outside, a soft spitting of rain had begun. People always call it weather, but sometimes it feels like commentary. "Coffee," he said. "We can be civil, can't we? It's important to model healthy co-parenting to the next generation." "Are you co-parenting me now?" I asked. He leaned in, speaking softly enough that only the two of us could hear, and the posture of it would look, to anyone glancing, like care. "You are making this ugly. All this," he gestured vaguely at the bank, "when it could have been smooth. Lila's sleep is suffering. The baby picks up on tension. Do you want to be the reason his little nervous system wires wrong? We're all doing our best here. It would be a shame if child services got spooked by, say, a report about an unstable grandmother threatening to interfere. People are so jumpy these days." He said it with the gentleness of a lullaby, so the words slid past the ear and only later arranged themselves into a blade. I understood. He was laying down a trail of future accusations like breadcrumbs for men in suits to find. "Get out of my way," I said. He smiled as if I'd flattered him. "Of course." He stepped aside and added low, "See you soon." On the sidewalk, the rain had become a fine mist that slicked the world into a single surface. I tucked my chin and walked faster. My phone buzzed. "Angela, are you at the bank?" I typed back, "Yes. Attempted access last week. Denied. Taking papers." Her reply was immediate: "Come to my place. I've got coffee. Also, a number." By the time I knocked on Angela's door, my hair had frizzed into a crown of static. She pulled me in with both hands. Under other circumstances, we would have done that old dance of half hugs and apologies about space and time and the ways grief misarranges people, but not today. Today we moved like a practiced crew. "I called my neighbor," she said, pushing a mug of coffee into my hands. "Retired cop. He knows people at the county recorder's office. And I texted Nora." Nora. The lawyer from church that helps with evictions. She's young but mean in the right way. She owes me because I bought 6 of those fundraiser cheesecakes she sold for the youth group and they tasted like glue. I laughed, a small sharp sound that startled me. The kitchen smelled like garlic and something simmering, and for a second I wanted to be a sister again and sit at her table and gossip about our dead, about who wore what to funerals, about how love always gets into trouble with money. But the tote on the chair beside me made a heavy argument. Angela's phone rang. She put it on speaker. A voice came on with a gravelly friendliness that sounded like the bottom of a pot. "This Angela's crisis line? Eddie here." "Eddie, you're on speaker with my sister-in-law," Angela said. "We need to know how to freeze a title." "You can't freeze it like a bank account," he said, "but you can make noise. County recorder can put a note. There's a thing called a notice of claim or an affidavit of fraud in some places. Scares off anyone with sense. And you need to pull the chain, see who's been sniffing around. We can check if there's a preliminary title report ordered. Your son-in-law's the type to test the fence before he jumps it." "How do we check?" I asked, both hands around the mug as though it needed steadying. "You call the recorder and ask for copies of any recent inquiries or filings related to your parcel number. Do you have your parcel number?" Angela snorted. "She has everything." I dug into the tote and pulled the old tax bill where the parcel number lived in small, officious type. I read it to Eddie. He grunted approval. "Good. And the will? Original?" I told him yes. "Then you're alive and in possession, right? No medical conservatorship?" "Not unless being tired counts." "Then get ahead of them," he said. "File police report for attempted fraud if you can stomach the station. Get a notary to witness you stating you haven't signed anything transferring title. Make copies of everything. Put your name and today's date on the backs of copies with a pen that leaks ink like it means it. Scare the cockroaches." When we hung up, the coffee had cooled to drinkable. Angela poured some into a saucer for the kitchen cat who wasn't supposed to have coffee and took a slurp from the cup in solidarity. "Nora's on her way," she said. She said to text her a photo of the forged signature. "It's not perfect," I said. "But it's wrong." My throat tightened. "How did we get here, Angela?" "She was 3 yesterday. I was icing a cake with my finger because we couldn't afford a proper spreader." Angela lifted one shoulder. "My brother had a weakness for big gestures," she said. "Your girl learned early that if she wanted something she could make a gesture larger than the need. Maybe she learned it from me. Maybe from the world. What matters is what happens next." The doorbell rang. Nora came in like a brisk wind that had read every statute twice. She wore a raincoat the color of a highlighter and carried a tote that announced, in block letters, "Not today." She shook rain from her hair and got to it. "Here's what we do," she said, spreading legal pads. 1. Affidavit of non-transfer and non-consent, signed and notarized today. 2. Letter to county recorder requesting a fraud alert be attached to the parcel file. 3. Cease and desist to son-in-law and daughter regarding any representation to third parties that they have authority to act for you. 4. A police report. 5. Call Adult Protective Services yourself before they can weaponize it against you. Document that you're being financially harassed. Offer to answer any well-checked questions. You control the narrative. 6. Draft a letter to the bank acknowledging their refusal last week and thanking them. Ask them to preserve any footage of the attempted access. 7. Change the locks. 8. Put your house on a do not solicit list with the vultures. 9. She paused to breathe. Eat something. You're shaking. I'm not, I said, discovering I was. Angela slid a plate in front of me with a hunk of bread and a dish of oil, like she was feeding a soldier between orders. Nora took photos of my forged signature beside my real one, her phone camera making its cheerful little sound like any of this could be cheerful. She dictated phrases while I wrote in my own hand. I, Mara Vass, being of sound mind and under no duress, do hereby swear that I have not signed, nor authorized anyone to sign on my behalf, any deed, quitclaim, power of attorney, authorization, or other document conveying or encumbering my property at. When she finished, she looked up at me with that lawyer look that always seems to ask, how honest are you willing to be about your pain? I met it. They told me I'm too bitter to be around my grandson, I said. Is that a thing people can say and keep custody of their souls? Her mouth softened. People say wild things when they're pretending love is logistics, she said. Let's give them paperwork they can't pretend about. While Angela pulled out her address stamp and wrote the county recorder's address from muscle memory, my phone buzzed again. It was a message from my daughter with a photo of the baby in a little hat with ears. For a second every plan in my head staggered sideways, and I had the ferocious impulse to text back something like I'll sign, come over, bring him. The caption under the photo read, "We're doing what's healthy, Mom. Please don't make this worse. Mark says the sooner it's done the sooner we can all be a family again." My thumb hovered over the keyboard. Nora saw the photo and didn't comment, she just pushed a pen into my hand until I felt something real and heavy to hold. We went to the notary first, Angela's friend at the shipping store who swore and then apologized and then swore again when she heard the story. She stamped the affidavit like she was stamping a passport out of a country you never wanted to visit again. "You get me if that man comes in here," she said. "I'll notarize his shoe to his forehead." We walked into the police station next. The officer at the desk had the tired compassion of someone who had stayed in a job because someone had to. I told him everything without raising my voice once. "It may not rise to the level of criminal fraud yet," he said, wincing at his own hedge, "but we'll take the report. Documentation never hurts. If he uses these papers to try to leverage a loan or a sale, that's a different ballgame." "Do you have a ballgame for threatening to call child services on a grandmother who won't surrender her house?" I asked. He rubbed his forehead. "People weaponize systems that were built to protect them. I see it every day. I can add the note. If there's a wellness check call, we'll have this on file. It helps." He handed me a copy of the report. There was my name in block letters, solid as a fence post. Outside, the rain had deepened to a steady gray line. Angela's umbrella whacked me in the temple, and we both laughed and muttered sorry in the old choreography of sisters-in-law who had learned to be kind on purpose. We went next to the recorder's office, where the clerk took Nora's letter with a sigh and said, "You just saved yourself 6 months of hell." She stamped, scanned, stamped again. Her nails were red and magnificent. I loved her for the art of them. At the end of the afternoon, my tote weighed what a small child weighs, my shoulders ached as though I had carried something living. We sat in Angela's car and let the heater blow on our wet shoes. "What now?" I asked, and for the first time all day the question didn't taste like surrender, it tasted like a door opening. "Now," Nora said, "you go home. You don't answer the door unless you want to. If they call, you don't pick up unless you're recording. If they text, you screenshot. Email us copies of everything. And Mara." She waited until I looked at her. "Stop apologizing for how steady your voice is." I nodded. It felt like a small ceremony, the taking off of a veil I hadn't known I wore. The rain smudged the world into softer shapes, and for a minute I let myself imagine the smell of my kitchen, the pie on the counter under its foil, the way the crucifix above the mantel always looked taller in bad weather, as if it stretched toward storms. We were 2 turns from my street when Angela's phone dinged again. She glanced at it and swore. "What?" I asked, the word as flat as a board. "She posted," Angela said, thrusting the phone toward me. On her screen was my daughter's social media page, a photo of a neatly staged room that one day might have been my living room if you took out the rosary and the booties and the life. The caption read, "Hard day. Learning to set boundaries with family who don't respect your choices isn't easy. Doing it for my son. Healthy homes only." Then a string of hearts and a tag for some therapist who sells pastel affirmations in a font that looks like handwriting. The comments oozed empathy for her strength. One woman asked if I was drinking, another wrote, "Cut toxic people first, you can always revisit later when they've healed." I had a sudden violent craving to reply with a photograph of my hands, the calluses and scars and the small crescent on my thumb from when my husband and I learned together how to wield a box cutter safely. I wanted to post a copy of the forged signature beside the real one and let the internet be as gentle to me as it was to her. But I did none of those things. I handed Angela back her phone carefully, as if it could go off like a grenade. "Let her have the chorus," Nora said. "We'll keep the records." Angela parked in front of my house and killed the engine. We sat in the quiet that feels like a stage right before the curtain rises. My front steps were wet and dark, the maple dripping. On the porch, a paper bag slumped against the door. I got out and brought it inside. It was full of peel and stick labels and a roll of fragile tape, anonymous and insulting. No note. The front door lock turned too easily. I made myself remember that locks can be changed. Inside, the house smelled like apple and rain. I put the tote on the table and took out the documents as if I were laying a table for guests. Angela set out plates as if we were. Nora took her coat off, dropped into a chair, and started drafting emails. It looked, for a blissful second, like a family. That was when my phone rang again. Unknown number, local exchange. I looked at Nora, she nodded and hit record on her own phone. I answered. "Hello." A woman's voice, crisp, the kind that has learned to talk across chaos. "Hi, is this Mrs. Mara Vass? This is Denise from Child and Family Services. We received a call today expressing concern about potential emotional instability and unsafe conditions around an infant. We'd like to schedule a visit to talk, just routine, nothing to worry about." I watched the breath leave my mouth. I saw Angela's eyes go black with a kind of fury that, if it had a temperature, would be cold as ice. Nora held up a hand with 3 fingers. "Breathe in, breathe out, breathe again." "Yes," I said evenly. "I'm happy to talk. I have a police report on file regarding family members attempting financial coercion, and I have legal counsel present. I'll be recording any interactions. When would you like to come by?" There was the smallest pause before the woman said, "Tomorrow morning if that works." 8 o'clock, I said. "I'll make coffee." When I hung up, the silence in the room felt like a new kind of oxygen. Nora's smile was quick and carnivorous. "Good," she said. "Let them come. We'll have your affidavit, the report, and the notarized letter on the table. We'll be pleasant and boring. Let them write stable, so hard their pens run dry." I went to the mantel and lifted the space where my husband's picture had been. The square of dustless wood looked like a wound new to air. I put the photograph back and pressed my fingers to the frame. Then I took the pie from the counter, unwrapped the foil, and cut a slice big enough to be indecent. I ate it standing up. The sweetness didn't cure anything, but it was mine to take. Angela began washing cups we hadn't used. Nora sent an email with a subject line that could kill a vampire: "Cease and desist. Unauthorized representation re. 14 Pearl Street." My phone buzzed again, this time a message from Mark. "We heard from the county. You're making this complicated. We'll meet in the morning, yes? Let's make sure Child Services hears one story. Ours." I typed a reply and erased it, twice. Then I put the phone down face first and reached for a pen. I wrote on a yellow pad in big schoolroom letters so that there could be no argument about what I meant. I will not sign. I will not be managed. I will not be shut out of my own life. I stuck the page to the fridge with a magnet shaped like a loaf of bread that my husband had brought home from the bakery, the year we finally found ourselves with a little more than enough. I took a breath that reached my back. I listened to my house, its small creaks, its old lungs drawing in the damp, the sound of water in the pipes like murmuring. "I'm done letting them set the terms," I said, and the sentence arranged something inside me that had been scattered for years. Tomorrow they will find me, documented, advised, and at my own table. Tomorrow, I stop being the woman who cleans up after cruelty. The rain hit the windows harder, as if applauding. Down the block, a car idled, then pulled away slow. I counted the thumps of my own heart, not like a tally of costs now, but like the strokes of a swimmer who has just turned at the wall and pushed off for the other side. Tonight I would gather every paper and every memory that had weight. I would sleep with the tote tucked against my chest like a child. In the morning, when the knock came, I would open my door to the state, to my daughter's next move, to anyone who wanted to test the strength of the woman they used to call soft. I went to the front door and slid the chain into place. The metal settled with a sound I wanted to memorize. I turned back to the table, where Nora's emails flew and Angela's hands were never still and my papers lay in neat, undeniable rows, and I knew with a clarity that made my mouth salt with something like joy that the story had changed rooms. I wasn't a guest in it anymore. I was its host. 8 o'clock, I said aloud, to the room, to the rain, to my husband's photograph. Let them come. The house didn't sleep that night, though I tried. The walls seemed to breathe with me, keeping vigil, their groans and sighs like an old friend reminding me, you're not alone. Angela had taken the sofa, Nora the armchair, each of us with mugs that grew cold and then were reheated, the caffeine less important than the ritual of holding something warm in our hands. My tote sat on the table, its contents spread like the bones of a story we were determined to rewrite: affidavits, police reports, notarized letters, stamped documents. Evidence, yes, but also armor. Nora had a pad of yellow paper she filled with a general's precision. We'll make 3 copies of everything, she said, tapping her pen. 1 for you, 1 for me, 1 in Angela's possession. Off-site storage. Redundancy is safety. If they try to manipulate or lose something, we produce another. They can't gaslight what we have in triplicate. Angela nodded, her arms crossed tight. I'll get a fireproof lockbox tomorrow. Eddie's brother runs a storage facility, he'll give us a discount. We'll stash a set there. I watched them plan and felt a strange swell in my chest, something I hadn't allowed in months, the sensation of being carried, even just for a moment. My whole life had been scaffolding for others, my husband, my daughter, my grandson, and here for a flicker of time, 2 women were holding the beam steady for me. Still, doubt whispered. What if they come tomorrow with their story polished and smooth, with smiles for the caseworker and printed lies? What if I look like the bitter, unstable woman they've painted? Nora saw it on my face, because she had the gift of stripping words down to their marrow. Mara, she said, leaning forward, you'll want to crumble when they walk in tomorrow. Don't. Remember, the calmer you are, the more unhinged they'll seem. Let them overplay. People like Mark always do. He'll think he's smarter than the process. That arrogance is our trap. I swallowed hard. And my daughter? She's a mother now, Angela said softly, her eyes dark. That's her shield and her weapon. She'll use the baby as justification for everything. But babies don't erase contracts or signatures. The law sees paper, not lullabies. It hurt, hearing my child reduced to a tactic. But maybe that was the clarity I needed. Love and betrayal had twisted together until I could no longer tell where one ended and the other began. Angela's words were the scalpel separating them. The hours blurred into a rhythm, copying documents, labeling folders, practicing answers to likely questions. Nora role-played the caseworker asking, do you feel angry toward your daughter? And I practiced the reply, I feel hurt, but not dangerous. I want a relationship with my grandson that isn't conditional on surrendering my home. She drilled me until the words sounded steady, not rehearsed. Angela fetched sandwiches from the kitchen and made us eat between strategies. By the time dawn peeled a thin line of gray across the curtains, exhaustion had smeared us all, but our table looked like a fortress of ink and signatures. At 7:30, Angela straightened the living room as though staging it for a photograph. She wiped the frames, adjusted the crucifix, plumped the cushions. First impressions matter, she muttered. Nora spread the documents neatly on the table with a cover letter on top. I smoothed my apron and tucked my rosary into my pocket. It wasn't armor in the legal sense, but it steadied me. When the knock came at precisely 8, my heart jumped but my voice was clear. Come in. The caseworker, Denise, was younger than I'd expected, with eyes that had seen plenty of trouble already. She carried a tablet and a messenger bag, her hair damp from rain. Thank you for having me, she said. This won't take long. Nora introduced herself as my legal counsel, Angela as family support. Denise nodded, unruffled, perhaps even relieved to see I had people in my corner. She asked the usual questions, about my health, my daily routines, my history with my daughter. I answered plainly, without theatrics, though inside my chest a storm raged. When Denise asked if I felt bitter, I paused deliberately, then said, I feel protective. Of myself, of my home, of my grandson's future. If bitterness is what remains after people scrape away trust, then yes. But it doesn't make me unsafe. It makes me determined. Denise looked at me for a long moment, then nodded and wrote something on her tablet. I appreciate your honesty. Just as the air began to feel manageable, the front door opened without knocking. My daughter and Mark walked in, as if summoned by some cruel choreography. Lila's cheeks were flushed, Mark's tie was perfect. They carried the baby in his stroller like a holy offering. "We wanted to be here to clarify," Mark said smoothly. "We know how stories can get twisted." Denise glanced at them, expression neutral. "And you are?" "Her daughter," Lila said, gesturing toward me. "This is my husband. We've been concerned. My mom's struggling. She gets angry, says things that aren't healthy around the baby. We just want what's best." It was rehearsed, polished. I felt the sting of it, the way she said struggling as though I were a broken thing. Mark handed Denise a folder, sleek, labeled, corporate. "Documentation," he said. "For transparency." Denise set it beside our stack but didn't open it immediately. Instead, she asked Lila, "Has your mother ever harmed you or threatened to?" Lila hesitated. "Just for a beat, but enough. Not physically," she said. "But words can hurt. And her refusal to accept help, that's a danger too. She won't even sign papers that would secure her future." Denise looked at me. I held her gaze. "Those papers were forged," I said calmly. "My signature was falsified. Here is the evidence." I slid our stack forward. Nora placed the police report on top like a trump card. The room grew taut as wire. Denise leafed through our pages, her brow furrowing. She compared my real signature to the forgery. Mark's smile twitched. Lila shifted, bouncing the baby's stroller lightly as though distracting from the crack in her story. Silence stretched until Denise finally said, "I'll be filing this report with my notes. Thank you all. I'll be in touch." When she left, tension snapped like glass. Mark's mask slipped, his eyes went sharp. "You've made a mistake," he hissed low enough that only we three heard. "You think the county will save you? This is bigger than paperwork. This is about family. About who looks stable in the end." Angela stepped forward, her stance protective. "And you look stable, threatening a widow in her own living room?" He sneered but gathered himself quickly. "We'll see," he said, wheeling the stroller toward the door. Lila didn't meet my eyes. The slam of the door echoed longer than it should have. After they left, the house exhaled. I sagged into a chair. Nora began gathering papers. "They're rattled," she said. "That's good. But they'll escalate. People like him don't back down, they double down." Angela poured me water. "We'll be ready." But even as she spoke, my phone buzzed. A new message, from an unknown number. I opened it and felt my stomach twist. A photograph of my deed, stamped and signed, not my signature, not my notary, but filed. The caption read, "Too late. Should have played nice." I stared at it, ice flooding my veins. The revelation hit harder than any threat so far. They hadn't just tried. They'd found a way. Somewhere, somehow, my house was already slipping from my name. The county building smelled like dust and ink, the kind of place where lives are boiled down to stamps and signatures. Nora strode ahead, her highlighter yellow coat a flare of defiance, Angela at my side like a shield. I carried the tote with the originals, the weight of truth pressing into my shoulder. Today was not about whispers in kitchens or quiet warnings, it was confrontation. Inside the recorder's office, Mark was already there. Lila sat beside him, the baby in her lap, her eyes swollen from what looked like rehearsed tears. They had a lawyer too, slick, gray-suited, briefcase gleaming. Mark looked up, smiled like a host welcoming guests to his theater. "Perfect timing," he said. "We were just finalizing." Nora didn't slow. She slammed our file on the clerk's counter, the sound sharp as a gavel. "Not finalizing anything. Fraud has been committed, and my client is here to correct the record." The clerk looked startled but took the papers. She glanced between the two piles, Mark's polished folder and ours, thick with notarized affidavits, police reports, original deeds. Her eyes narrowed. "Give me a moment," she said, retreating to a back office. Mark leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. "This is embarrassing for you, Mara. Dragging strangers into family matters. If you just trusted us." "Trusted you." I cut in, my voice sharper than I'd planned. "You forged my name, Mark. You stood in my house and threatened to use child services as a weapon. That's not trust. That's theft. Lila flinched, but Mark's smile didn't waver. Strong words from someone the system already flagged as unstable. He turned to Nora. Did she tell you that? Caseworker visit, notes about bitterness and hostility? Doesn't look good in court. Before Nora could reply, the clerk returned, with a supervisor. He held both folders, his expression grave. We've got a problem, he said. 2 deeds. One notarized properly, years ago. One filed last week with irregularities. His eyes landed on Mark. The notary stamp doesn't match our records. That's forgery. The room shifted. Mark's lawyer paled. Lila's breath caught audibly. Nora seized the opening. Then you'll void the fraudulent filing and preserve the original? Yes, the supervisor said firmly. And we'll be forwarding this to the district attorney. He looked straight at Mark. This isn't a family matter anymore. It's criminal. For the first time, Mark's mask cracked. His jaw tightened, his hand squeezing the armrest until his knuckles whitened. You don't understand the deals in place, he hissed. This property. This home, I interrupted. I stood, every ache in my bones swallowed by anger that finally burned clean. This home is not a bargaining chip. It's where my husband bled for his family, where my daughter was raised, where my grandson should be safe. And you, I turned to him, my voice carrying in the sterile office. You thought you could steal it with paper and lies. Lila's eyes filled again, but now the tears looked real. She whispered, Mark, stop. But he didn't stop. He stood, looming, voice rising. She's manipulating you all. She's old bitter, clinging to bricks and ghosts. We're the future. That house will rot under her. I was securing something better. By forging her name? The supervisor snapped. By breaking the law? Silence fell. Everyone could see it now, the arrogance, the greed, the cruelty laid bare. Even Lila wouldn't meet his gaze. I took a step closer, steady now. You asked me once what bitterness looks like, I said softly, looking at my daughter. It looks like this, watching the child you raised sell your life to the highest bidder. But strength looks like standing up anyway. And today I stand. The clerk stamped the original deed with a fresh seal. The sound echoed like thunder in the quiet office. The fraudulent folder was set aside, tainted, evidence now. Angela let out a breath that was half a laugh. Nora smiled, sharp and satisfied. Lila's shoulders sagged as though something heavy had finally broken inside her. Mark just stared, his power draining from him like water down a sink. The supervisor slid the deed toward me. Mrs. Vass, your title is secure. And the investigation will proceed. I placed my hand on the document, the paper cool under my palm. My husband's voice whispered in memory, hold steady. Wood remembers what pressure taught it. Mark gathered his briefcase with jerky movements, muttering under his breath. Lila rose slowly, clutching the baby tight. At the door, she looked back at me, her lips parting like she wanted to speak, but no words came. Then they were gone. The office hummed again with ordinary sounds, stamps, phones, keyboards. But for me, time had shifted. I wasn't the woman begging at the checkout line anymore. I wasn't the silent one cleaning counters to cope with betrayal. I was the woman who stood in the open and said no. Still, as we walked out into the daylight, I knew it wasn't over. Mark wasn't the kind of man to retreat quietly. And in Lila's eyes, behind the shame, I had seen something else, fear maybe, or a secret she hadn't told yet. Angela touched my arm. You won the round, she said. Yes, I murmured. But the fight isn't finished. Because even as I carried the stamped deed home, I couldn't shake the question that gnawed at me, what if the forgery wasn't Mark's idea at all? What if it started with Lila? The deed sat on my kitchen table for days, the new stamp gleaming like armor. Every time I passed it, I touched the paper, as if reminding myself, this is real. This house is still mine. Mark's downfall was swift once the district attorney took interest. Forgery carries weight heavier than his polished words could lift. His law license, the credential he wielded like a sword, was suspended pending investigation. I heard whispers through Angela's neighbors that investors pulled back, deals collapsed, and the man who once strutted in $1,000 shoes now paced in worn soles, trying to talk his way out of handcuffs that hadn't even closed yet. As for Lila, she drifted. When the storm first broke, she clung to Mark, insisting it was all misunderstanding, that she hadn't known the papers were false. But evidence piled like stones, emails, drafts, photographs of my home listed before she ever spoke to me about help. The shame spread across her face until it hollowed her out. She stopped posting photographs of the baby in curated light. She stopped answering calls. I heard from a friend of a friend that she moved back into a small rental, Mark gone, the baby restless without a father who could stay still. And me? I stayed. I cooked bread again, the smell filling these walls that had nearly been sold from under me. I sat with Angela over coffee, the kind that tastes of victory because it is shared. Nora came by with papers for me to file, but this time we laughed as we signed, because now the signatures meant protection, not surrender. The house seemed to settle too, less creaks, more warmth, as though it recognized it had survived another siege. Sometimes I caught myself standing at the window, waiting for Lila's car to pull up, for her to bring the baby so I could hold him without conditions. Weeks passed. She didn't come. But grief, I realized, doesn't always mean weakness. It can mean roots. And I had decided mine were not for sale. One evening, as the light slanted across the living room, I lit a candle beneath the crucifix. I whispered my husband's name and thought of the way he used to steady wood, clamp and hold. Pressure teaches shape. Perhaps life had done the same to me. It had bent me, pressed me, nearly broken me. But I was still standing. And maybe one day my daughter will return, when she learns the difference between love and leverage. Until then, this house remains what it has always been, a sanctuary earned through sacrifice. So if you hear someone tell you you're too bitter, remember this: sometimes bitterness is just the taste of boundaries finally holding. And sometimes, it's the flavor of survival.